Another thing that I would place to is music.
Mm.
You know, it's we talk about the heart, right? We mentioned something about the heart, that if your heart is pure, then that's how you get close to Allah. And one of the ways to your soul, to your heart, is your ears, what you listen, your mouth, what you say, and what you watch. Your eyes is what you watch. So think about those are like doors into your heart. You know, if you be careful with what you see, this is one thing that's good. You know, if you be careful what you listen, this is that's another door that leads to your heart. If you be careful how you talk to people, how you treat people, this is also goes into your heart. That's how one of the ways that you purify your heart. And obviously, as we spoke these examples, each one of them has something to do with how we absorb knowledge, how we absorb things into our soul.
To see what is it that you're thinking, what is it that you're feeling, and what is it that you're actually doing, and compare it to what you value. Because I mean, we're all here because we value Islam. We're all here because, you know, that's one of the most things that we value in this life. But the reality is, we talk about the phones and social media and everything like that. If you do not choose your values, and you do not actually sit down and write down what your values are and compare them to how you're living your life, this world is going to choose your values for you. And the way that social media is created now, and the way that information is being fed to us now, those values are being forced onto us, and we are going to value things subconsciously.
I think that is very important, because that is one of the 7 regrets that are mentioned explicitly in the Quran, that the people will have on the Day of Judgment. And one of them is that the people of Jahannam, they will say, I wish I did not take so-and-so as a friend in this world, right? So we want to make sure we're aware of who our friends are, who is our circle, because it is very, 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 very important. It is very vital in terms of being able to put yourself closer to Allah, or pulling yourself away from Allah, right?
I'm like, man, I want to be like this guy, bro. He must be, like, his life is dedicated to, you know, debating and giving da'wah and worshiping Allah. Like, man, like, why can't I, like, be like this? You know, like, what is stopping me? And then that's when you sit and think, again, reflecting, like you said, you're thinking about your values, you're thinking about what you want to do, what you want to be, and why you're not there. And when you start to do that, again, that's all reflecting is. You're just looking at, okay, what am I doing now, and what can I do different?
Exactly.
And you start to pinpoint things like, okay, what am I doing in the mornings, what am I doing in the afternoons? You start to, you know, zoom in and get in the specifics, which people don't do. And you know, I think that's what we mean by people don't reflect, is they don't look at what they're doing day to day and what they're valuing. And so, you know, find someone like you admire, you want to be like, and obviously Muhammad, peace be upon him, the Prophet Muhammad is the best of example.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم
السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Welcome back, brothers.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having us back.
Not a problem, of course, my pleasure. Today's topic is going to be about disciplining the soul. And inshallah, we'll start off with Abdul Rahman. You can go ahead and take that away.
Inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. So inshallah, today's topic again is the discipline of the nafs. We'll start with a verse from the Quran to understand why the discipline of the nafs is important. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He says, and as for the one who feared standing before his Lord and restrained his soul from evil desire, then indeed paradise will be his refuge. This is in Surah Al-Nazi'at in verses 40 to 41. So understanding this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us again a reward in terms of being able to discipline the nafs. And then this reward is not any reward, it's the greatest reward that can be given to someone. And there's a reason for that, because disciplining the nafs is not an easy task. It's not something that, you can just wake up and then all of a sudden you have, discipline of the nafs. It's not how it works. And with that, some characteristics based on, again, scholarly opinions, and then different individuals who have spoken about this matter of the nafs. Some necessary characteristics to achieve discipline would be understanding the nature of the nafs. Then it would be tazkiyah, which is self-purification. And then we have tafakkur, which is reflection. And then we have sabr, patience. And finally we have zuhud, which is detachment of the dunya. Inshallah, I'll pass it to Hazm. Let him get into it, inshallah. But these are 5 characteristics that are of necessity to be able to start the discipline of the nafs. And inshallah, we can all reach that state.
I'm sorry, we've been holding. I don't know. Can we just laugh it off? Not you.
No, yeah, you good.
No, I'm laughing.
He said necessity.
Necessity, y'all. My bad. I'm sorry.
We're just holding it, bro. We got.
The necessity. So.
And I couldn't say scholar.
That's okay, right? It happens.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. No, that was good points, valid points. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Abdul Rahman Hassan has a lecture, and I sent you this clip a while back. he goes over a book. There's a book that goes over the biography or stories of some of the great scholars in Islam. And he mentions that one thing that they all had in common was that they were all well disciplined. And he mentions that we're not born with discipline, but it is something you need in order to become like one of these great imams.
Yep.
And one of the ones that I like in particular is Al-Ghazali. And so he has this big collection of works. It's like, which is split into 40 books. One of the books is called Disciplining the Soul.
Okay.
Something like this. And honestly, that's one of the reasons why we chose this topic, because of that book. And honestly, we're going to be pulling a lot of quotes from that book. One to start off with, where I believe he's quoting one of the scholars. His name is Al-Razi. But he said, man has three enemies: the world, the devil, and the soul. Be on your guard against the world through renunciation, against the devil by disobeying him, and against the soul by abandoning desires. And so we're thinking of discipline. And what were some of the traits that you mentioned? You mentioned patience. What else?
So there's patience, reflection, detachment, and then there is self-purification, and then understanding the nafs itself.
So pretty much all of these have to do with abandoning your desire. Because again, when it's the main thing Al-Razi says, I believe he's quoting Al-Razi, about basically going against your, or disciplining your soul, which is removing those desires. So this is the main thing which differentiates someone who is well disciplined and one that's not, and which is having that ability to restrain themselves from their desires. And I also think back to the hadith where the Prophet, peace be upon him, says the man is not one who can wrestle, but he's one who can control his anger. And I look at anger is an emotion, right? This is a desire. Like, we have this desire to become angry, right? When we get angry. And so my opinion, like, I like to connect this with discipline. Like a strong man is one who's well disciplined, who can be patient, like what he's saying, who can control his nafs, who understands his nafs, who can control his desires. See, I'm doing what you're doing now. This is your fault. And so I guess we can get into like some of these specifics on what are the things that we want to control. I don't know, do you have anything specific?
I really want to add a point to what he was saying. Something we don't consider when it comes to testing is that we are tested both in times of ease and times of good, and then also times of hardship. So there's two different forms of testing, again, during the time of ease and during the times of hardship. And a beautiful narration by Abdurrahman ibn Auf, radiallahu anh, one of the companions that were promised Jannah as well. This companion, he said in this hadith found in Sunan al-Tirmidhi, he says, we were tested with hardship alongside the Messenger of Allah, ﷺ, and we were patient. Then we were tested with prosperity afterwards, and we were not patient. So again, to make it easier to understand, he basically said, when we were tested with hardship, it was easy for us to be able to be patient, especially when being along the side of the Prophet ﷺ. But afterwards, when we were tested with time of ease, after all the hardship, when the Prophet ﷺ was there and Islam and Islam, etc., was gone, and then there came time of ease, he says that was harder to be patient with than it was when we had hardship and we were alongside the Prophet ﷺ. What does that make us realize? It makes us realize that desires, nafs, times of ease, is harder than hardship itself. And it's something that, again, it's not something you can wake up tomorrow or after and then all of a sudden 1 second you're, a disciplined human being. No, it takes time, it takes effort. And one beautiful point we get to learn from Imam al-Ghazali and all these other great scholars. Again, like scholars that spoke about this are Imam al-Ghazali, Imam al-Qayyim, Imam ibn Taymiyyah, Imam al-Razi, Imam al-Kushairi, Jalal al-Din al-Rumi, and then other scholars. They spoke about 3 different concepts of the nafs. They said that the nafs has 3 stages that it's held at, and then it's a progressive stage. So like from one stage to the next stage to the next stage, it's progressive. And some people, unfortunately, they stick at one and they never go up to the other, or they're at the other and then they fall back to one, and it's a consistent back and forth. And there's people who are prosperous and they're at the 3rd level. These 3 levels of the nafs are the commanding self. That is the first level. This is the lowest stage of the soul, where the nafs incites on an individual to commit evil and follow base desires. And the Quran reference to that is Allah SWT says in the Quran, indeed the soul is persistent, enjoyer of evil, except those upon whom my Lord has mercy. And some dominant characteristics is that they're dominated by this person who is in this state of the nafs is dominated by desires, ego, and material pursuit. This is where the soul lacks a very big portion of discipline, and it pulls towards sinful actions. I'll let you guys touch on that and then I'll move on to the other two stages of the nafs.
Yeah, subhanAllah. I mean, that's even what you were saying earlier about the different, like, you got nafs, you got desire, you got the world. There's another scholar, I don't know if you guys know Bamba.
Never heard of it.
He's from Mobamba. No, he's I think it's Sheikh Bamba. He's from the Senegalese area. I don't remember the time when he was living, but subhanAllah, he talked about it like that, in the sense of there's a few enemies, for us in general, or a few things that can distract us, and he related it to nashhadu. He was like, the nat or the noon, that's the nafs, right? And then the seen or the sheen, the seen is shaitan. And then nashhadu, the ha is hawa, which is, worldly desires or just desires. And then the da is dunya. So, that those are all things that are around us, that if we bring our awareness more to those things, we can realize that, yeah, there is other ways for us to pay attention to certain things that come up to our consciousness, like, being able to identify, is this coming from my nafs, which, you're referring to the different parts of the nafs, or is it coming from, from the shaitan? Is it coming from desires, or is it coming from, the world, just from me seeing something in the world? Being able to identify those things, I think, is something that's really important. But of course, today we're going to focus more on the nafs, and learning, I guess, more what the different parts of the nafs is. And I didn't even know there's 3 different criterias to the nafs too, subhanAllah.
And again, these are topics or these are parts of the nafs that the scholars such as Imam al-Ghazali, very reliable scholars, Ibn Taymiyyah, they spoke about, and then they derived this from the Sunnah and the Quran. So these 3 types of the nafs, or the stages that the nafs can be at, are not just any stages that can be found, randomly by anyone. Rather, they are explicit from the Quran and the Sunnah, and these scholars are used as references to authenticate those stages of the nafs, which I didn't even know of before today, or before doing research on this topic, subhanAllah. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think, again, like, I like to define, based on what we were saying now, I think we can define discipline as being able to resist your desires.
100%.
I think that's a good, easy definition. And again, this life is a test. Like, we're tested with our desires. We desire haram all the time. Not even things that are haram, but things which are in a gray area. And that's one hadith, I'm not going to quote it because I don't want to butcher it, but if it, like, essentially tells us to stay away from this gray area if you can, or it's better. And then there's Salaf in the past also who they stayed away from things which were permissible as well to increase in their discipline and their worship. And I think, again, this is most important now with Ramadan coming up. I think Ramadan requires the most amount of discipline.
Yeah.
Like, how it's so much more difficult trying to sit there in ibadah and worship and studying. Again, when you've deprived yourself from desires like food and water. Like, the human body, it can go the day without food and water, but it's like our desire. And again, in this book from Al-Ghazali, he quotes Al-Razi, who mentions things that essentially you should try to stay away from if you want to increase your discipline. And one of the things is eating too much, right? Eating excessively. He also mentions like sleeping excessively and talking excessively. And these are small things we don't think of as desires. When you go grab the snack here and there, you go out, you spend a lot on food. You don't think of this as a desire. It's very normal. But these are the small things. If you can try to tweak, it will really help with your discipline. And these things will progressively, it'll allow you to better your worship, because you have a stronger mind, right? And it's much easier to get into that worship.
True.
You get what I mean?
True. And subhanAllah, touching on that aspect in Ramadan, Allah makes it easier for us to change when He says that He changed the shayateen. All the devils are chained that time. Makes it easier for us because it's going to be really tough. Imagine going through all this ibadah within 1 month and and having the devil in your head all the time, constantly. Like, being disciplined at that time can really improve you. So it's very important. Like, discipline goes outside of Ramadan, discipline goes outside of work, discipline goes outside of your household, etc., etc. And one thing we can think about it, because we all go to the gym, that can relate to us, is that discipline, if you don't go every day, you're gonna have a lack of disciplined later on within a week or two and such and such. So
Mm.
discipline is very good, and also can transfer to like discipline of the soul. That the main point we're getting to is discipline of the soul, like getting up the fajr, praying on time, trying to pray on time, try to pray all the 5 prayers, trying to do extra stuff that the worldly desire would take away from you. Your attention is going to be grasped on other, like let's say you're watching a video instead of doing dua, instead of reading Quran. Those are things that takes us away from our deen in such a way. But that is like a discipline that we can discipline your soul, that this is what you need for your own good, basically for your own soul, like doing dua, doing charity, doing extra stuff for your own good. That could be a form of discipline as well. So
yeah, again, even though like there are a lot of things which are permissible for us, but removing these things will increase your ability to remove things which are haram, right? So like an example might be like doing cold showers instead of hot showers.
Oh,
like,
that's tough.
Do it early morning,
It is.
bro. Like you want a hot shower, bro. That's hard early morning. But removing this, it increases your ability, which is essentially your discipline, to remove some other bad habit that you're dealing with, which may be haram.
yeah.
And so there's another quote. Maybe I'll bring it up later.
No, I know which one you're talking about. It's from Ibn al-Qayyim, right?
Yeah.
Where he's talking about that, and he mentions like the soul is one of the biggest enemies, because once it knows how to basically do certain things, it can control you, and that's when they basically would stay away from even permissible things, and that's one of the things that I did read that. They would stay away from permissible things, because at the end of the day, when you do stay away from permissible things, like you said, what more, like, how easy would it be then to stay away from anything else?
I think you want to clarify also what we mean by permissible. We don't mean to stay away from salah.
No, obviously not. But what we mean by permissible, it's like, again, things which are
to fill the time and fill the void.
Things that may be a waste of time. Like I think Ibn al-Qayyim says, actually I don't want to misquote, but things that may waste your time, but which are permissible. So like an example may be like watching a movie, right? For like it'd be permissible for me to watch this movie for 2 hours, but is it the best use of my time?
Right. That's what I'm saying. That's why I refer, like, if you watch a YouTube video instead of like doing the dua or reading the Quran.
Going on your phone.
Yeah.
Again, like a hot shower, like that's
You really want
The
that?
hot-
You really want that?
Bro, I tried.
But like a hot shower is permissible, yeah.
It's permissible, right?
Yeah.
And if you even think about it, like, people didn't used to have hot showers. You know what I'm saying? Like, realistically, like, they didn't. But now it's such a thing that we don't even think about it. It's something that we have all the time. But if we're able to actually stay away from that, it does help a lot of discipline.
So going to, again, like I was saying, like, subhanAllah, everything you guys are touching on, again, and what you were saying specifically too, referring to Ibn al-Qayyim, it is referencing, again, this stage of the nafs, which is nafs al-amara, right? And then, which means, again, the commanding self. This stage of the nafs, it's, again, the comment here says that it's dominated by desires. In a way, the person is a slave to his desires or her desires. This way we have to understand, in the stage that we're talking about right now, is if you can't even hold yourself back, right, from things such as maybe watching a movie, right? What makes you think you can hold back from sleeping with a woman? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. Or from, picking up that cigarette or that vape, or, from being around this group of people, that group of people, being in that environment or this environment. If you can't simply just not watch a movie, right? And the reason why it becomes harder on a person to do this, because the person has not, you could say, trained their nafs to an extent. And because of that, they're stuck at this stage of the nafs, which is, again, the stage of the commanding self. Again, it's the nafs that's commanding you. You're basically a slave to your desires, right? And then it says, again, the other characteristics in this state is that there's a high level of ego and there's a material pursuit, right? So think about the material pursuit, where you become so in tune with the dunya, right? You become so in tune with just this worldly life, you tend to forget the akhirah. You put it on the side and you're chasing everything that is of this dunya, right? You're chasing everything that is of this dunya that's going to stay in this dunya after you're gone. Unfortunately, that's what happens when you're at this state of the nafs. And there's a reason why it's called the commanding self, right? The nafs is commanding you, right, to do 1, 2, 3. And with you not being able to distinguish from what the nafs is commanding you when it comes to the inclination of good and the inclination of bad, you're stuck. You're stuck at this state of the nafs. If you guys want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good, like, way to kind of understand the nafs too. That second stage, which it just brings me to, like, something.
First stage.
That's the second.
That's the first stage.
Oh, I thought you said the first earlier.
I know, but I was just reinstating the first.
Oh,
just a second.
I thought you thought. I thought you said the second stage is the commanding self.
No, no.
Nafs al-lawama, nafs al-amara.
Yeah.
And what was the third
So I
one?
thought you
No,
said
nafs al-amara is the first one.
Oh.
Yeah, the commanding self is the first one.
Yeah.
I'll talk
So
about
we're
the second
talking
one.
about the second one is the nafs al-lawama, no?
Nafs
that
al-lawama.
Let me. I just want to make sure I have these in order.
Yeah, no worries.
Nafs al-lawama, like you
Go
said,
ahead,
it is, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but I was gonna say, well, whichever one it is, the commanding self, like what that reminds me of, which I like to bring challenges. Like say we should challenge each other. But one of the challenges that I would say is like, if we can, which is for me, for you guys, for anybody watching, we can just reflect on what we do in a day.
Mm-hmm.
Reflect on what you do in a day includes what you do physically, like any physical action that you do with your body, and it includes also what you do with your mind, which is any thoughts that come into your mind. Those are things that you're doing. Reflect on them and be aware of them, and also be aware of the feelings that you have. Just choose one day, even like whether it's you're making a mental note or you're actually writing down, these are feelings that are coming up for me, these are thoughts that are coming up for me, these are actions that I'm doing, so that you can actually track and see what your nafs is commanding you to do, or be aware of what your nafs is commanding you to do, because we have to pay attention and be aware. And in order for discipline to come in, or for growth to even happen, you need to actually be able to kind of like be aware and notice and be honest with yourself about where am I at right now and where do I need to be, and then set those goals and make those plans, and then start moving in that direction.
That's a good point.
Well, so we can move forward. I'm just gonna state again the second stage.
Okay.
And now you can talk about the second stage on the nafs, which is again what you were saying. So this is a nafs al-lawama, right? Which is the blaming or self-accounting self, right? So at this stage, you basically become like the nafs starts to become aware of itself, aware of its actions, starts to be able to hold itself accountable, starts to feel this sense of guilt, this sense of uneasiness when they do something wrong, or when it's inclined to evil, etc. Some characteristics again is that the individual struggles with guilt, seeks repentance, and attempts to improve. So starts taking a step forward. And then this person again starts to be able to reason between good and bad, and starts to be able to reason between, I guess you could say, the moral compass of what Islam tells us to live by. So at this state, the nafs again is able to be self-conscious in a way.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess maybe we can go into specifics of what are some things we can do.
I'm gonna touch on the third stage, and then after that we can get into the different things that we can do. This first portion of what I'm speaking of is just for us to get an understanding what the nafs is, and then we can go into that, right? So the third state, just to move things forward, is nafs al-mutma'inna. That is the third state, and that is the final state, and the highest state that the nafs can be at. And then this nafs is the content nafs, the tranquil nafs. It's at the state where this nafs is fully conscious of Allah, fully conscious of their actions, and they are to the highest level, free of any you could say worship to their desires and the worldly life, and they understand the balance between dunya and akhirah. And then some characteristics of the state, like of being at this state of the nafs, is you're free from ego and desires, right? To as much as you can be, right? When we say free, I don't mean completely like you have zero inclination to desires, or zero inclination to ego, but you have pushed yourself at a state where it's very hard for you to fall into desires, very hard for you to fall into temptation. It's almost like an impossible thing to do.
It's not a thought you entertain, basically.
Exactly. Exactly.
It
It's
comes
very
a thought,
hard.
you have the thoughts that comes on and off, but then you're easy to entertain them or not.
Exactly. And this person starts to again do what you were saying. Instead of voiding their time with unimportant things such as watching a movie for 2 hours, they start to replace that with, for example, ibadah, or they start to replace that with self reflection, or being able to experience, like gain some knowledge or learn something new. They start to benefit themselves for the akhirah, in terms also with the balance of the dunya. And then the scholars, they say again that every mu'min, every Muslim goes through these three states of the nafs, these three stages. And then we as Muslims are striving to get to that final stage. Every day, as Yusuf was saying, you start to make a plan, you start to hold yourself accountable, you start to be self-conscious, self-aware. And then from there we can touch into how we can basically reach that. How can we move from stage 1 to stage 3? How can we move through these stages? And then I'll briefly just remind us of, again, the characteristics of what it takes to be disciplined And to be able to move from one state to the other state, again, of course, this is the whole point of this conversation, is discipline, right? To be able to move through the stages, you need discipline. How can we attain discipline? 4 other characteristics that we should consider when coming to attaining discipline is self-purification, which is tazkiyah, tafakkur, which is reflection, sabr, patience, and finally zuhud, detachment, right? And then we can start getting into those, inshallah, one by one. If there's any specific one you guys want to talk about right away, inshallah, go ahead.
No, I mean, when I think of self-purification, one thing that I've been thinking about a lot recently is, in a sense, kind of like hippy-dippy, but like self-love, you know? So
Yeah,
he said hippy-dippy.
hippy-dippy. It sounds kind of hippy-dippy, but self-love. So what I mean by that is like doing what is best for you.
Exactly.
And understanding. So again, and understanding this, it makes it much easier to resist some of my desires. So when I'm sitting there and it's like, okay, sometimes like I'll maybe delay the sunnah prayer, right? I'm just kind of sitting there on my phone, like I'll do it in a bit. But what's best for my soul? Is it to delay it or to do it now? You know, because I want what's best for my soul. Man, my worst fear is on the day of judgment. Allah shows me, okay, you had all this time and you wasted so much sitting there doing nothing. This is my worst fear, bro, I'll tell you. Because this is the biggest thing that I, like, laziness is my number one, man. He's my number one op, bro.
You attain that by reflecting. That's how you got it.
Yeah, reflecting.
Yeah.
And yeah, again, like understanding that, okay, you want what's good for you because you want to be close to Allah. You want to be a better man. You want to be a better person. So do what is best for you. So what is best for me at this moment right now? What are my options? And, you know, what should I choose?
Yeah, I want to touch on that, like self-purification, because that's really, you know, actions that you can do in the now and in the present moment. Like delaying your sunnah, you know, that's something that's gonna like kind of take you away from self-purification. But praying your sunnah adds to self-purification, and you know, just trying not to distract yourself. Because I mean, even talking about like before all this technology, before we had phones and everything like that, like you had to find things to fill the time, and it wouldn't just be like easy where you could just grab your phone, go on your phone and do all that. But you know, it just reminds me of like the Sahaba, how their mouths used to be moist with, you know, just doing dhikr, and you know, they used to put like sometimes stones in their mouth, something to bite on when they go into the bathroom, because of they don't want to do dhikr in the bathroom, because that's how often they would do dhikr. And you know, when you're sitting down idle, you have a lot of voices in your head, and we have a lot of voices, you know, and sometimes they're negative and we don't want to pay attention to them. Sometimes they're positive and we get lost in them. But at the same time, you know, we want to make sure that we're doing things like dhikr to fill that time and to help us self-purify. Like there's a friend of mine in Nigeria. He does 500, or I think it's 1,000, one of the two, but he does, you know, salat an Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He does that every single day, and he has the counter, and you know, mashallah, he seems like he's always like in a pure state, you know, and like, you know, it's really beautiful, and inshallah we can be doing more dhikr to help us self-purify.
And also, there's one important aspect of this. We need to know and recognize, we touched up on that earlier too, recognize whether it is the shaitan that's whispering in your ear, doing the bad things, or was it your nafs, you know. And that is very important to distinguish between the both, to understand where that coming from and how to deal with it. You know what I mean? If it's from the shaitan, that means there's dhikr you can say that can stay away. You can read Surah al-Kursi, Ayatul Kursi. You can read that, and you know, it'll be as quick as that. You can read that and it goes away. And if your thought process calms down and you don't think about that bad thing you were thinking about earlier, that means it's most likely it's the shaitan whispering in your ear, you know. And if it's the nafs, like we touched up, is not just wake up, do this, and it's gonna be disciplined, right? The nafs is when you start disciplining yourself day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year, you will start noticing that you become a lot purer than what you were started before. And this is what the nafs does, you know.
Progressive,
Yes. Yep. So it's very important to distinguish.
Mini both, man.
It wasn't as bad as this. You're okay.
Okay, bro.
So it's very, very important to know the difference between the two, so you can not cure it, but you can solve it in a matter where it's supposed to be solved and how it's supposed to be solved. So
interesting that you say it was a cure, because the Prophet ﷺ, to understand tazkiyah or purification, self-purification, we can start with the hadith from the Prophet ﷺ, right, where he says, indeed there is in the body a piece of flesh, which if it is sound, the entire body is sound, and if it is corrupt, the entire body will be corrupt. Truly it is the heart. This is found in Sahih Bukhari. And then what we learn is Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, he touches on this. And he says, in his own definition of what it means to purify the nafs, to be in a state of self-purification, his definition is cleansing the heart of all that distances it from Allah and adorning it with all that brings it closer to Allah. So this is the definition of Imam al-Qayyim. Imam al-Ghazali, I'm sorry. Imam al-Ghazali, forgive me. Imam al-Ghazali again. So he says to be able, so first we have the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he touches on the heart. And he says that the heart is almost in a way that determine. Wait, how do I word?
Determine what's going on here.
The determinate.
You mess it up. I don't know. Who's next?
It's a determinate aspect of if you can control your nafs, if you're able to stay away from the waswas of the shaitan, the waswas of the ins, again, like the human being. So if you're able to, again, truly, like, if you're able to be in a good state with Allah, you have to be able to work on your heart. This is what Prophet ﷺ tells us. And then Imam al-Ghazali again touches on that, and he says, to be able to do that, what you have to do, and to be able to be in a self-purification state, what you have to be doing or working towards is being able to fill your actions with that which brings you closer to Allah, and release, like, let go of actions that pull you away from Allah.
Yeah.
And this is how you purify your heart. Wait, go ahead.
Go for it. I thought you were done. Sorry.
Forgive me. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, so I wanted to touch on what can we do to get to that state, Like,
So let's maybe summarize, and then let's get into specifics. So summary, there's different stages of, again, where your nafs is at, how close and how far you are from Allah, and I guess how well disciplined it is. And so discipline is, we can say, being able to resist your desires. And attaining the discipline comes with the things he stated, which was purifying your soul, or purifying your, what was it?
Self-purification.
Patience.
Reflection.
Detachment.
Yep.
Staying away things which can waste time, which are permissible. Things like watching a movie or whatever. And these things will increase your discipline, which is being able to resist your desires, which will help you have a stronger nafs, which will bring you closer to Allah.
Okay.
I think that's a decent summary. Yeah?
Right. So, but what I want to get to is the more specific examples as to. So let's focus on that aspect for now.
Yeah. Which one?
And the first, nafs al-lawam, nafs al-ammara, which is the first stage. Wasn't it the first stage, nafs al-ammara?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the discipline of the soul. We need to give example for us, obviously, and for the people who's listening, because you can say, okay, you need to be disciplined, but what does it mean to be disciplined?
And I think,
like, what is the examples that you can give to people that can show, okay, this is what discipline mean, and you can give them different examples that they can choose from. It makes it easier for them to understand that this is what discipline means. This is what you can do. This is these are the steps, instead of like wanted to just say the main topics of it. It'll be easier for people to understand. And
so what we can touch on right now again. So again, what we mentioned is, like Hazm said, the summary is the nafs has 3 stages, and then understanding these 3 stages helps us be able to determine what are characteristics that we need to be able to adopt to be able to move forward and moving from stage 1 to stage 3, inshallah. And what we're speaking about right now specifically, which is the first stage, is self-purification. And the Prophet ﷺ offered us hadith in Sahih Bukhari about the heart. And then Imam al-Ghazali, he broke down the hadith in a very, very small definition. And what he said in his hadith again, he said in his definition, just to restate, and this is going into how can we self-purify. Let's touch on this one now. How can we self-purify first?
Yeah.
And this is where Imam al-Ghazali, he says that it's cleansing the heart of all that distances it from Allah. And then in replacement, you adorn it with all that brings it closer to Allah. So now we can talk about how we can do that. How can we, cleanse? How can we cleanse the heart from doing things that pull it away from Allah, and how can we do things that adorns the heart with things that pull it closer to Allah?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We can talk about that.
So first thing is the best of deeds are those that are done consistently.
SubhanAllah.
Even if they're small. And so an example of this, again, because we want to get into specifics now, maybe the sunnah of fajr. So the 2 rakats before fajr. So if this is something you don't do, this is something where you can implement every day and be consistent on. And if you want to focus on this, have this be your thing, right? So I think it's much more of a reward to do this every single day rather than to spend one whole day in the masjid. Because again, this is something consistent you're doing every day. And so what you want to do is you want to pinpoint one of these things, and you want that to be your thing. You want to stick with that, right? So another example might be 1 page of Quran a day. Right? That might be your thing that you're doing consistently, even though it might seem very, very small. But again, that's what the hadith says. The best of deeds are those that are done consistently. And again, these are the consistent things which are training your discipline, training your nafs, training your soul to implement things again, which is going to benefit you consistently.
Yeah.
And to be able to resist from your desires, which would be to sleep in rather than praying those sunnah prayers. So I don't know if you guys want to give more examples or maybe
we
maybe
can
your own
go
thing.
one by one.
Yeah, I mean, I would say kind of what I was touching on earlier about doing adhkar, because definitely, praying sunnahs, that's something that even for me, I've been trying to do more too, and especially leading up to Ramadan. But I also want to touch on like dhikr, and the friend of mine that I mentioned that he's doing 500, 1,000, those are like high numbers, but you can start with and it's easy when you do it after the salah, because we know after the salah there's the sunnah of doing subhanallah, alhamdulillah, Allahu akbar 33 times each. There's also other adhkar that you can do. You can say astaghfirullah, even if it's 10 times after every prayer. You can say hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel, even if it's 10 times after every prayer. You can pick one, you can do both, or you can incorporate more. And I think definitely doing these at the time of prayer kind of helps, because you already have the prayer as like it's a fard, you're doing it, so like we're incorporating sunnah into it, also incorporating the adhkar, which is sunnah too.
But you're already in the state of mind,
and you're in the state of mind too. It's easier, and it really helps for you to purify your soul and to kind of complete the prayer.
Going into that, subhanallah, again, so what we're doing right now is we're giving examples of how to basically pull away from these actions that are taking us away from Allah, and trying to adopt things that will adorn our heart to be closer to Allah. And I think in terms of this specific matter, I think one of the most important things we can do to ourselves and for ourselves is reflecting on our environment and our circle, right? Trying to better our circle, trying to be able to, again, reason on who I'm around, right? Who am I spending time with? Where am I spending my time, right? I think that is very important, because that is one of the 7 regrets that are mentioned explicitly in the Quran that the people will have on the Day of Judgment. And one of them is that the people of Jahannam, they will say, I wish I did not take so-and-so as a friend in this world, right? So we want to make sure we're aware of who our friends are, who is our circle, because it is very, 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 very important. It is very vital in terms of being able to put yourself closer to Allah or pulling yourself away from Allah, right? So I think that's one thing that we can start to, inshallah, do for the sake of cleansing our heart and self-purification, which is reflecting on our circles and trying to better our environment and who we're around.
MashaAllah. Yeah, these are very good examples. Right? This is why one of the reasons why I said let's give examples for the people to understand what we're talking about, because we can speak about the topic level, but people wants to get an example as what they can do and what kind of an idea we can give them that they can lead towards, right? And one of the ideas that I personally did with my own self is that I replaced social media, with something different. I actually took off social media at all for like a long period of time. I step away from social media. I don't look at anything. The only thing I will do is just go on YouTube and listen to lectures all day. Like I don't care. I can repeat the lecture all day long as this is what I'm listening to. And the other thing that I replaced to is music. It's we talk about the heart, right? We mentioned something about the heart, that if your heart is pure, then that's how you get close to Allah. And one of the ways to your soul, to your heart, is your ears, what you listen, your mouth, what you say, and what you watch. Your eyes is what you watch. So think about those are like doors into your heart. If you be careful with what you see, this is one thing that's good. If you be careful what you listen, this is that's another door that leads to your heart. If you be careful how you talk to people, how you treat people, this is also goes into your heart. That's how one of the ways that you purify your heart. And obviously, as we spoke, these examples, each one of them has something to do with how we absorb knowledge, how we absorb things into our soul to make it better. So there's a lot of things that we can do to replace bad habits into good habits. We just gotta find out which one works for us and which one that's not gonna be too much on us, that to the point where it's gonna be, oh my God, this is too much, I can't do it, I can't handle it. So like you say, consistency, like if you do one thing every day is better than doing one thing the whole day every once in a month. You know what I mean? Just like a good example. It's a bad example, but you see how only people show up to Friday prayer but never pray the rest of the prayers. You still get rewarded for the Friday prayer, and may Allah make us at the highest level of having to pray all day, not all, but to pray all the prayers. But also I understand that people have things to do and such and misguided, etc., etc. But this is an example of to pray every day, even if it's the fard. And sometimes if you slack on the sunnah, it's also, it's a bad thing, but these are the small things that we need to implement each and every day on a daily basis to better ourselves, basically.
Inshallah,
Are
inshallah.
you okay?
Got an
Yeah.
eyelash in my eye.
Oh,
Oh
You
my
have what?
God.
Like an eyelash in my eye.
You got an
Sorry.
eyelash. I was looking. I'm trying to concentrate, but I'm just. I'm like, what is going on?
Oh my God.
Yeah, I would just add one more thing, like another challenge, because you said about social media. Honestly, it's one of the really important things that I think if anybody is willing to try
Well,
to do.
Go to the bathroom. Please.
Yeah, for some water.
We're kicking him out of the podcast today.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
But I was just gonna say, because social media is like, I've experienced that where I took off all social media, but I would say, like, if anybody were to try that, like, it's so beautiful. If let's say you're not even replacing it with something right now, you're not replacing it with something good, you're just taking that out.
Mhm.
Even just that will do a lot to purify your soul.
Exactly.
Like, just
Subhanallah.
even if it's for a day, for a week, for whatever amount that you can do, I would say to delete it, but that's a huge step. But even just starting by saying, okay, this whole day I'm not going to do it, or this whole week, or in these 2 days, whatever it is that somebody can do, try it and see how that works for you.
Yeah.
Inshallah.
So inshallah, for the sake of time, we're gonna move into
You wanna wait
the other 3 stages. He'll be back, inshallah. He'll hear me. He's on his way. I hear him open the door.
Yeah.
Look at him. All
You
right.
feel
There
better
it
now?
goes.
Are you good?
Alhamdulillah.
We put
How-
the whole
how
thing
did
on
that
hold
happen?
for you.
How did? Oh, okay.
Inshallah,
Bro,
khair,
just
inshallah.
randomly started doing. I'm like, oh my god, can you check on him?
Yeah, you check on.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Speaking about the heart, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, we're going to touch now on reflection, right? Which is tafakkar. Which is a very big, characteristic that we, not just for the sake of our nafs, but for the sake of being a Muslim, we have to be able to adapt. We have to be able to adapt. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do they not reflect upon the Quran? Or are their hearts, or are there locks upon their hearts? So again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, do they not reflect upon the Quran? Or are there locks upon their hearts? This is in Surah Muhammad. This is verse 24. Speaking about the hearts as we have been right now, the Prophet ﷺ, told us that this is, basically the recipe on how to, be able to completely control yourself in every way, whether it be in your nafs, your understanding of the world and the hereafter, your actions, etc. All this stuff. This is how to control it, is by the heart. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran that without you being able to, without you reflecting on the Quran, reflecting on the words of Allah, reflecting on the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, reflecting on the Tabi'een, wa Tabi'at Tabi'een, reflecting on these, individuals and our Deen and everything about it, you have, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the way He's saying, you have locks upon your heart. There's chains that are wrapped around your heart, And if that is the case, if there's chains that are wrapped around our hearts, then, that means we're in the state that, for example, Imam al-Ghazali was talking about, where instead of replacing this evil inclination to be pulled away from Allah, right? We're in a state and adorning it with good. We're in a state where, instead of being in a state where our hearts are adorned by good, we're in the state where our hearts are being inclined to do things that's pulling us away from Allah, right? And one of those things that's pulling us away from Allah is not reflecting. This is why reflecting is important. And this is the words of Allah explicitly in the Quran, where He says, do they not reflect, or are there chains around their hearts? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know in the earlier parts of the Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah, He also says that within their hearts is a disease, and sure that I will continue to increase that disease. This is, again, if you listen to this and you still don't want to reflect, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us. It is a very dangerous game you're playing. You're playing a very dangerous game against Allah and against His words. So one of the other aspects of being able to control the nafs is being able to reflect. Inshallah. I'll let you guys give examples upon that, inshallah. For the sake of time.
I went through that personally. If I didn't have that time period of my life, I didn't reflect. I want to be right now sitting with you guys, talking about this, talking about Islam, talking about etc. etc. And it's a very important thing that I tell everybody. Like, you need to reflect. Like, everybody tell me, like, how did you flip your life around? What was the thing that I'm like, first of all, like, sincerity needs to be within yourself. Like, you need to be sincere about yourself, that you need to change. Second of all, you need to reflect on what you're doing at the moment. Reflect on how your life is. Reflect on, the things that you're doing. Reflect on what could have been better that you need to do better with. So having to reflect, it put me in a position where I really got me close to Allah, where I'm like, okay, this is essentially reflection. What it is to me, Allah, as if when you get the reflection right, as if Allah is showing you this is your life now, this is your life after, and you just got to choose. Which one are you gonna choose?
SubhanAllah. And I would touch on that real quick. Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, in his book, the Book of Knowledge, he states that 1 hour of reflection is better than a lifetime of heedless worship.
SubhanAllah.
And for me, I sit back and I'm like, SubhanAllah, and it goes back to, remember the first podcast we did where we spoke about, for example, there's Muslims that are growing up Muslim and they're dying Muslim without ever questioning their deen, without ever questioning what they're actually believing in. And this is why Imam Ghazali, rahimahullah, again, he states that 1 hour of reflecting is better than a whole lifetime of heedless worship.
And also, I want to touch up real quick. The best time to reflect, really, really, like when I was doing that, I feel like I was so close to Allah. Tahajjud time. Get up at night. Everything's quiet. You know, everybody's sleeping. You're the only one that's up. You know, you're gearing up. Be sincere with yourself. Ask Allah. Be as transparent with yourself, with the things you want, and reflect. That time, bro, is like, there's no better time than that.
Yes,
or even before you get up for Fajr. Like 15, 20 minutes, you do the same thing, the 2 sunnahs, and you reflect there.
SubhanAllah. You guys have any life examples that we can implement to help us better reflect?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I touched on this a little bit about reflection, you know, earlier when I mentioned, like, I actually had to do this, and that's why I even, like, said that challenge, because, you know, when I was younger, like, not even, you know, that many years ago, like a few years ago, I chose to sit down and actually evaluate, like, what am I doing on a daily, you know, and that included what I'm physically doing, what I'm thinking, and what I'm feeling. And that reflection is very, very important. And I said it, you know, as a challenge because I do want people to do it, and you guys too. And even myself, I want to do it now where I'm at. But to be able to see what is it that you're thinking, what is it that you're feeling, and what is it that you're actually doing, and compare it to what you value. Because, I mean, we're all here because we value Islam. We're all here because, you know, that's one of the most things that we value in this life. But the reality is, we talk about the phones and social media and everything like that. If you do not choose your values and you do not actually sit down and write down what your values are and compare them to how you're living your life, this world is going to choose your values for you. And the way that social media is created now and the way that information is being fed to us now, those values are being forced onto us, and we are gonna value things subconsciously. Like, subhanAllah, I was at this talk, this guy was giving a talk at this conference I was at. He's a Marquette lawyer, which, I mean, it's not super related to Islam, but it's related to reflection, when he said we have 11 million thoughts in a minute, and we're only conscious, or in a moment, and we're only conscious of 40 of them. So that just goes to show you that there's a lot of things in your subconscious, especially being fed to you nowadays, that if you're not reflecting on it and actually realizing, like, you're going to be pulled away from whatever it is that you may value. And if you don't, like, actually designate what you value, you don't write down and be aware of what you value, whatever it is that the world wants you to value, whatever it is that anything, you know, social media wise wants you to value, that's what you're going to value.
That's a very valid point.
That's a beautiful point. Hazem, this is for you, and you're going to give us the example now. How can one start to reflect? How can one push himself to start reflecting?
Well, I don't want to take away from what he said. It was very good. Pathetic.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
How can one start to reflect? Again, it's like, for me, when I started practicing again, I would watch, you know, a lot of these Da'i guys on YouTube. Someone like Muhammad Hijab, for example. Like, I admire him a lot. And I look at his backstory and I relate to it a lot. And then I see when he was, man, in his early 20s, he was doing, like, tons and tons of debates. I'm like, man, I want to be like this guy, bro. Like, he must be, like, his life is dedicated to, you know, debating and giving da'wah and worshipping Allah. Like, man, like, why can't I, like, be like this?
Yeah.
You know, like, what is stopping me? And then that's when you sit and think, again, reflecting, like you said, you're thinking about your values. You're thinking about what you want to do, what you want to be, and why you're not there. And when you start to do that, again, that's all reflecting is. You're just looking at, okay, what am I doing now and what can I do different?
Exactly.
And you start to pinpoint things like, okay, what am I doing in the mornings? What am I doing in the afternoons? You start to, you know, zoom in and get in the specifics, which people don't do. And, you know, I think that's what we mean by people don't reflect, is they don't look at what they're doing day to day and what they're valuing.
Yeah.
And so, you know, find someone like you admire, you want to be like, and obviously Muhammad, peace be upon him, the Prophet Muhammad is the best of example. But even someone like today, you know, like, it's much easier for us to look at him,
to relate.
To relate to. But obviously that's when, you know, that's the benefit of studying the seerah. You know the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and you start to change your values. And when you start to do that, you start to look at, okay, what am I doing wrong? You know, why can't I be like this?
Yeah.
And then you start to change things throughout your day, you know.
SubhanAllah. Yeah. I mean, I want to add quick before we move on to the next point. A reflection is not just a thing that, like, reflection can be a person. that you look up to, like you just mentioned. You know,
Mhm.
somebody that you reflect to. You mentioned reflection can be a place. Reflection can be a book. Reflection can be a person. So you just find your reflection that you look up to at one point and see that you want to be like them. That's gonna be your main reflection. That's gonna spark your reflection up. Reflection also can be like a bad event that happened to you. I'm like, that's when you start reflecting back. You know, like let's say death. When death happened in the family, that's when you start reflecting back. That can be one of the reflection that how you start seeing things moving on forward. So reflection is not just a subject topic on a small manner, but is a wide topics into what you see as a reflection. So just want to add that to that.
Real quick before I go into patience, inshallah, which is our third characteristic that we should adopt, is when it comes to reflection, in terms of what we're speaking of, is we're trying to reflect on our priorities, right? I think that's the most important thing that we have to consider when reflecting. Whatever it may be that you consider reflecting, I think the most important thing is that you start to be able to break down your priorities. What matters? You know, what really matters, right? And one of the best ways to make yourself understand what matters is tell yourself what you're taking with you after. When you get put 6 feet under, and when there's people around you standing above you, and you're calling for them, and none of them are listening to you, they can't hear you, and you're being there's the dirt that's being thrown over your grave, over your qabr, you know, and the people are making dua, they're praying upon you, and then the footsteps start to, you know, fade, and the people start to walk away, and then eventually the people forget about you when you're in the grave. There's gonna come a time, wallahi, there's gonna come a time where the people that are closest to you are gonna forget that you ever were there. They're gonna forget the soreness and the sadness that they had for you when they first buried you. That's all it's gonna get forgotten, because those people eventually will be led to the same place that you were put in before them. You know, so we start understanding what is it that am I taking with me. You know, reorganize your priorities. You know, start chasing what really matters at the end. We're going into, inshallah, the topic of patience. May Allah guide us to that step, inshallah, by the way. Patience is another aspect of discipline. You know, interestingly, Imam Shafi'i, rahimahullah, he says that patience with the burdenness of discipline leads to the sweetness of success. And we have Imam Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, who states that patience is the foundation of discipline. So he writes, patience is the foundation of discipline. Without patience, the heart falters, the nafs becomes rebellious, and worship is abandoned. So from Imam Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, rahimahullah, he says that, you know, in order to start being in a state of discipline, first you need to be able to be in a state of patience. You need to be able to be patient. And when I say patient, I don't just mean patience in times of hardship, but patience can come in 3 different forms. There's patience in obedience, patience in avoiding sin, and patience during trials, during hardship. So these are 3 things we consider when we talk about patience. Is again patience in obedience, in worship in Allah, patience in avoiding sin, and holding our nafs and our desires accountable, and patience during trials, patience during hardship, and may Allah inshallah protect us from that. And then remember that early on, when I mentioned about Abdurrahman bin Auf, rahimahullah, when he said that, you know, it was easier for them to be patient during times of hardship and harder during times of ease. If you guys have any examples you want to touch on, or inshallah anything you want to add to that?
Yeah. This is more so a personal story. I like to keep my personal stories, but I give you a glimpse of it just a little bit, just that can touch up on that aspect itself. When I first came back here, I was talking about that the other day. When I first came back here in 2020, after coming back from Jordan, this is what the main reflection was. When I went back to Jordan, that was the spark of my reflection. So I came back here, and I literally had nothing. It was like I literally had like no place to stay. I was living with my parents, obviously. I had no job. I had nothing. It was just a job that I got accepted by just over the phone from where I was living back in Florida before coming here. Anyways, so coming here, I was living with a friend of mine, and subhanallah, I was practicing, and I was trying my best to be the best Muslim I can be. And it seemed like easy for me at that time. It was very easy. So I started looking at people like, how come they don't pray? How come they don't do this? And subhanallah, it was so easy to me. And I feel like, why people not doing this? But little do I know it's not about the ease. It's about Allah giving you that huda. You know, that Allah is giving you that hidayah. Sorry.
SubhanAllah.
I didn't remember. I had nothing, and everything was easy to me. That was my struggle. I had nothing, but also I was praying. I was get on for Fajr. I was doing the sunnahs. I was there, everything. But then when I got everything now, things become hard. Now I have everything. I'm comfortable. I have everything that I need and even more, but I'm struggling with my prayers. I'm struggling with dua. I'm struggling with keeping up with being the best Muslim I can be. You know what I mean? So that can show you that at the lowest, I had nothing, but I was more content. And now that I'm a little bit higher than I was before, that I'm struggling, I'm not content. I have what I have now, but I'm not content. That's the struggle that maybe that can be example as what you were trying to refer to, but that's just a personal thing that.
So how can we be patient? How can we
That's a
start
good.
pushing forward to being patient?
Yeah, I mean I have another hadith too, which this is Sunan Ibn Majah. It was narrated from Ibn Umar that the Messenger of Allah said, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the believer who mixes with the people and bears their annoyance with patience will have greater reward than the believer who does not mix with people and does not put up with their annoyance. And to reflect on this, even for me, an example is like there was a time where I thought, okay, me isolating myself and not being around people is better, and it's gonna give me like more patience, and I'll be calm and I'll be okay and all that. But in this hadith, it's showing that actually being around people, being able to like be patient with whatever it is that's coming up is something that is a part of ibadah, and it's something that is important. It's something that we need to be able to look at and be able to do, because you need to be around people. At the end of the day, there's jobs that we have to be around people. As men, we're supposed to provide and we're supposed to go out and be in the world. You're supposed to be around people, so you need to be able to be patient in those moments. And also just community. You can't just be on your own and not be around people. So you need to be around community, and to be able to be around people and be patient is very important. And I guess like a way for me when I started like saying, okay, I need to be more around people, I need to come out, I need to interact with people, it's just like trying to kind of get out of my head and focus on, let's say, a dialogue that I'm having with somebody instead of my inner dialogue. Because a lot of times the lack of patience can come from something that maybe is said, or something maybe that you see that makes you go back into your head and start thinking about a negative thing, and then the lack of patience can come. But then being able to like introduce the positive thoughts while you're having a conversation with somebody, or being able to just like with the inner dialogue tell yourself that no, and push it to the side, or bring something positive, or even enlighten the mood when you're talking to somebody, even if, let's say, something that you're talking about is becoming tense, or the annoyance that was talked about in the hadith. If you feel that starting to come, do like introduce a positive thought, and it's something that you have to consciously do. So it takes effort, but inshallah, if it's something that somebody has an intention to do, Allah will give them the strength and the ability to be able to do that, inshallah.
Inshallah, good point.
Yeah, I like what you said. I think understanding the religion will help you with your patience. You get a lot of answers through different hadiths and Quran verses, and patience is context specific. So like, an example might be, you have an opportunity to get something now, but it might displease Allah, rather than waiting a little bit and having something which pleases Allah. And like in that context, I would think to my head like, okay, if I give this up for the sake of Allah, He'll replace it with something better. If I'm searching for a job and I can't find it, in my head I'll be like, okay, be patient, because Allah's the best of planners, and I'm putting in effort. So it's just a means of understanding and reading more hadiths and things like this, and you'll start to have answers and kind of guides on how to be patient, and things which will encourage you to be patient.
Yeah.
Again, like giving up something for the sake of Allah, maybe waiting some time, and then knowing that Allah will replace it with something better, maybe in this earth or in thereafter. But understanding things like this will encourage you to be more patient, and it'll help you give you an understanding of why.
Subhanallah.
Yeah, and knowing that like Allah's with you too, because Allah in the Quran says He is with the patient. He is with the patient. So the actually keeping that in mind is something that will help you. And like I said, it's definitely conscious, and you have to be conscious of the fact that like you said, reflecting on the ayahs, reflecting on the hadith, because patience is a huge part of who we are as Muslims, and it's a form of ibadah. And the more we realize that, I think the easier it will be to be able to do acts of patience.
Yeah, and there's a verse that says, "Inna ma'al usri yusra, inna ma'al usri yusra."
فإن مع العسر يسرا.
Yeah, so that translates to with patience there's ease. With patience there's ease. You know, so that is one way to think about it. That every time you're being patient, there's ease to it.
I think it's in فإن مع العسر يسرا إن مع العسر يسرا.
Yes.
With hardship,
With hardship,
there's
yes,
ease.
sorry, yes.
With hardship,
With
there's
hardship, in the yes, hardship. Thank you for correcting me. With hardship, also hardship can come with patience. You know, also that.
ease. Of course.
So you can implement that. Yeah. So.
Subhanallah. That's beautiful what you said too. And then another thing to remember on top of what you just said about inna ma'al usri yusra, inna ma'al usri yusra is la yukallifu Allahu nafsan illa wus'aha. Allah surely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He's the all just, He's the most fair. So He says, I'm not going to test the soul with more than it can handle.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to test it with what the soul is capable of being able to overcome. Right? It just
SubhanAllah.
takes the effort to overcome it. That's
Yeah.
why I think that's another aspect of patience is recognizing that no, this is something Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has entrusted to you to test you with, that He knows you're going to get over. He knows
Yeah.
you're capable of getting over it. It's just, are you willing to, wait it out? Or are you willing to take that step? Are you willing to hold back? Are you willing to go this way or that way? And for the sake of knowing that at the end you are going to get over it, right?
Yes.
May Allah protect us, inshallah.
I mean.
And I want to talk about detachment because I think there's a recipe to this, subhanAllah. After talking about all this, there's a recipe, right? If we detach from the dunya, right? First we reflect, then we detach. By detaching, we start to be patient. By being patient, we start to be able to self-purify. And by self-purifying, we ultimately reach discipline. And that is how to start to take care of the nafs. Right? So subhanAllah, it's all tied together. But real quick, for the idea of now detachment, which I think is one of the most important things that as Muslims we have to be able to do. We have to be able to detach from the dunya. We have to. And in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this worldly life is no more than a play and amusement. But the hereafter is indeed the real life. If they only knew. If only they knew. This is in chapter 29, verse 64 of the Quran. And to be able to understand this further, Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, he says that zuhud or detachment is not abandoning the world, but it's freeing the heart from its hold. The world is a tool for the hereafter, not the goal itself. So if we reflect on this and we think about, okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that this world is not the real world, right? Rather we're here for a temporary time, right? But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, put us in this world for a reason, right? So what do we do with this world? We don't just we're not monks. We don't just sit, for 24 hours doing ibadah. No, we have a portion of the dunya we have to take care of. And to be able to do that, Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, he says, right, to not abandon the world, right, but freeing yourself from its hold, right? So freeing yourself from the grasp of being so in tune with the dunya, right? And then he says to, instead of just abandoning the dunya, rather Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give it to you as a tool, as a means to be able to reach the akhirah, right? And the akhirah that you want to be in, which is the Jannah, inshallah. I'll let you guys touch on that, inshallah.
SubhanAllah.
Sorry.
I don't got much to say, to be honest, bro.
I think we did touch up on a lot of good things and a lot of good examples that a lot of people take away from.
Inshallah, we can summarize real quick, inshallah.
Summarize, wrap it up.
Yeah.
Inshallah. So I'll summarize real quick what we talked about. First, we talked about that there's a very, very big importance to the discipline of the nafs. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that the reward for the one who holds back and disciplines himself and his nafs is Jannah. And inshallah, that's where we all want to be, inshallah. So
Inshallah,
first we have to understand the importance of why we discipline ourselves. Second, we talked about the stages of the nafs, right? There is the self-demanding nafs. So the nafs that demands that has control over you. And you're basically a slave to your desires and your nafs. Second, we talked about you move to a stage of being able to hold yourself accountable. So you start to be aware of your actions. You start to be able to feel guilty for your actions. You start to be uneasy about it. And then finally, you get to a state where you feel content. You're content with your relationship with Allah. And you have gotten to a state where you have, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, washed your heart of all that evil and have cleansed it and adorned it with what Rasulullah has told us, which is that good, inshallah rabbil alameen. And that thing that's inclining us closer to Allah and not taking us away from Allah. And we said that there's 4 ways we can do that, inshallah rabbil alameen. First, we talked about self-purification. And then we talked about tafakkur, which is reflection. And we talked about patience. And we talked about detachment. And again, like I said, it's a recipe, subhanAllah, right? To be able to detach, you have to reflect. So you reflect, inshallah rabbil alameen, and then you detach. And after detaching, you start to become patient. And after becoming patient, you start to be able to self-purify yourself, inshallah, for the sake of Allah. And that's how you ultimately build the recipe to be able to reach a state of discipline, not on just your nafs, but on your heart and everything that's surrounded in the dunya, and your life here and your time here, inshallah rabbil alameen. May Allah protect us. Any final points, inshallah?
I would say that all this be considered as Ramadan is coming up.
SubhanAllah.
And we can implement all these, and hopefully we can attain the highest of Jannah, inshallah.
Inshallah rabbil alameen. I'll finish off with Surah Al-Asr, which is a good way to finish off. And Hazm, if you want to give a dua, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. صدق الله العظيم.
السلام عليكم ورحمة
السلام
الله
عليكم.
عليكم.
وبركاته.